Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. Since its inception, Jennifer has interviewed many prominent women in the industry to help turn ideas to action and grow a network that can help build a better future for women. Women remain the driving force behind this growth, but male allies can play a critical role in helping to bring about these changes. That is why Jennifer has launched Mentors That Make a Difference, a spin-off series that allows men to speak on their experiences and share how they are helping drive social change to close the employment, pay, and culture gap for women in technology. We hope this new segment will continue to inspire change and encourage growth of women in the industry. Listen in as these collaborative stories start right now.
Welcome to Tech in the Right Direction, the podcast. This week, I'll be speaking with Ryan Estes. Ryan is the co-founder of Kitcaster. He validates and scales Kitcaster products. Prior to Kitcaster, Ryan owned a media and marketing agency for 10 years. For 8 of those years, he has hosted the Founders Podcast Talk Launch. Consistently ranked in the iTunes Top 100 podcast, he has recorded 300 plus interviews with more than 250,000 downloads. Ryan, I'm so excited to have you on the Mentors That Make a Difference segment of our show. Thank you so much for being an ally for women in technology. Tell us more about you.
Jennifer, thank you. I really appreciate being on the show. I'm super excited for this conversation. So a little bit about me. I'm kind of a simple guy. I'm an entrepreneur here in Denver. I'm a dad. I've got 2 teenage kiddos, and I'm a martial artist, among other things. But lately, I've been really into yoga, which has been feeling so good. Particularly, I mean, it's what are we in, mid-February right now, and just heating the bones with yoga has been what I've been all about.
That's great. I loved yoga, but it was really tough on me. So now I'm doing Pilates instead. But are you doing the hot yoga?
Yeah, there's core power yoga. So I don't know if there's kind of a lineage associated with it. But generally the rooms are about 100 degrees and it
Right.
just feels extraordinary.
Oh, God, I would love that. I'm going to have to look for a place that does that near me. So that's great. So, this podcast is focused on bridging the employment, pay, and culture gap for women in technology. What are you seeing in the industry today?
Of women in technology. So, I'm in a unique position. I have a company called Kitcaster, and we book entrepreneurs on top podcasts. That's all we do is we take entrepreneurs and we put them on podcasts. And it's really fun because we get to see a broad spectrum of different entrepreneurs. Specifically, we work with funded startup founders, entrepreneurs with exits, C-suite executives. So prior to that, I had a founders podcast that I recorded 350 episodes of people talking about their entrepreneurial journey, and had the pleasure of interviewing dozens of women in tech and in STEM fields. And, I'm happy to say that, they're very successful, and it was really cool to hear about their story. And we do a lot of the same at Kitcaster. We have, I think we've got maybe 125 clients, and I'd say probably, a third, if not half, are women startup founders. So we really work in a position to facilitate the conversations that they can have with not only the podcast host, but with that audience, talking about their journey and kind of the problems that they're solving for.
That's great. And I'm so glad that you give them a voice, on different podcasts so that we can really start to work towards together bridging that gap so that we can get more women into technology. Unfortunately, numbers are declining because through the pandemic, they've been leaving the workforce because there's so many demands on women with kids at home and learning at home and all of that becomes their responsibility. So we just have to keep encouraging and building that confidence to come back into the tech industry.
Yeah, maybe you could educate me about that a little bit because that's kind of what I was seeing too, the statistics where they talk about, what that everyone left the job force and that there's the great resignation. Um,
Hmm.
but when you look statistically, it's like, well, actually, it just looks like a lot of moms, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
stayed
it's really
home and that it wasn't like some mass exodus. It was just like it made sense for mothers to stay home because what are those kids going to do? I
right.
was in a great position where my wife was able to stay home with my kids for through the kind of lockdown and pandemic. She's back to work now. But yeah, my son was in sixth grade for when everyone's kind of going to school from home, and the instructions I remember from when they started doing school remote was like, hey, take a screenshot of this and email it to the teacher. And he's like, what's a screenshot? What's an
Hmm.
email? What are you talking
Hmm.
about?
Right.
So really for them to kind of be where they are now, which is, as well caught up as you could, it really took, a full-time commitment from my wife to work with them with online tutoring. So yeah, it's a lot of lessons were learned, and I think a lot of mistakes were made. Hopefully, we learned something that we can improve upon in the future for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, so that's so true. And you're very fortunate that you had a wife at home that could take care of that, right? Because the learning had to happen for your kids. And if you were not home to guide that, it's very difficult to do. And in many cases, parents didn't even have the knowledge to guide that process. So it was just very unfortunate. And hopefully things are starting to go in the right direction again.
I agree, absolutely.
So, what are some qualities in an ally that we should look for as we build allyship? Because, we need a support mechanism to get to equity. So, how can allies support us? What are some of your thoughts?
How can allies support who?
Women.
Support women. Oh boy, I don't know. That's a big question. Maybe I'll break it apart a little bit, and maybe how I can support
Mhm.
women.
Right, right.
Particularly, I have personal interests because, I have a daughter and I have a wife and I have mothers. So of course I want to see them flourish and succeed. So I think that um, I'm certainly a person that has no shortage of opinions, but I think what's important, particularly if I'm speaking from a male perspective and I'm trying to understand a female perspective or anybody who's maybe like has something different to offer than me,
Hmm.
is just being really open to listening, and not trying to exert my opinion or maybe not even to form an opinion,
Hmm.
but to take the opportunity to listen to other perspectives, particularly maybe ones that don't align with me, and giving it an honest shot. So I think listening is a good first step. I think the second is probably good faith, is entering into, if it's a discussion or if it's maybe a touchy topic, that I'm entering in good faith, that I'm not trying to trap anybody in some kind of semantical mistake, or I'm not trying to um, begin with making any assumptions, but assuming that the person that I'm engaging with, or perhaps trying to help become an ally, is working from their own values and interests. And by relating to that, hopefully we can find some kind of understanding. And even if we don't ever find understanding, maybe we can be friends. I think one wonderful thing I love about what you're doing in podcasting and kind of my career in podcasting is that conversation has this component of human decency baked into it.
Hmm.
People will naturally kind of find common ground if given good faith.
Hmm.
So that's probably where I would start, is listening and just entering in to any kind of discussion with good faith.
Great. Those are great, great points. Listening is so important, and good faith is so important. We talk about so many people have unconscious biases that they don't even know they have because they're unconscious. But the awareness of listening and going in with an open mind really brings those biases out in the open, and then you can really examine them to see if it's really a true feeling or it's just an unconscious bias, and then you can move from there. But the other thought is we need allies to give us a voice in on the at the table when we don't have a voice. You know, there's sometimes we try to speak up, but in a room full of men, maybe we don't have a voice in that room. So to have other men or allies help us by giving us a voice is also very important.
Hmm. Well, I'm listening. I mean, I think that's, you know, I don't know too much about these subjects, but I do know my own personal bias that I'm loud and I'm a large person and I'm pretty assertive, you know,
Mhm.
so going into that with that understanding of who I am, and also knowing how that might, particularly for women, if we are, let's say, like in a discussion and there's men and women in
Mhm.
the conversation, is making sure, especially, you know, in a leadership position, you know, I have 20 people on my team, a wonderful woman that work for me is intentionally confronting any kind of potential bias by choosing to shut my mouth from time to time.
No, that's so good of you to have that awareness and to say that, because you know we need that kind of help, and we will do the same. We can be allies to others as well. You know, in different situations, there are some stay-at-home dads, and you have to, you know, give them a voice at, you know, the moms group or school or wherever. So it
Yeah,
works both ways.
you bet.
Yeah. So, you know, we're in this whole new remote working world. Directions, my company, we've been remote for a while, probably like 7 years now. But, you know, this is new for a lot of people because of the pandemic. How do you effectively manage a dispersed workforce?
You know, delicately and again, ready to learn. There's a couple of things, and different people have different capabilities again with working remote. It was really difficult for me in the beginning. I started working from home maybe, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. And for me, the thing that I really had to overcome was the gravity of the refrigerator, because I knew that there was tasty snacks that I could go get all the time and subsequently gained like 35 pounds.
Mhm.
So that was challenging. But you know, some folks got kiddos at home. Some folks have roommates. There's a lot of just environmental things that need to be kind of dealt with. One way that we do it is we have certain standards about working remote, and one is just like having a dedicated workspace that
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
your office. You know, that office might double as your bureau after you're done with work, but during work hours, you know, clear your spot and have a place that you can go sit down at work. I think is really important. So that's huge. And also just to speak on work from home and the advantages that it has, is I feel like there's kind of some human dignity baked into the kind of work from home culture, which is largely that, you know, we're working with professionals, we're working with adults, and the assumption is that if you're working from home, you're managing your own time, and you don't need to ask me if you need to go to the your dentist appointment, or this morning, for example, when our kids were on, you know, 2 hour delay from school, you don't have to like say, hey, I'm going to be a little late. You're managing your own time, and I feel like there's a certain like maturity that might have been lacking in corporate culture in particular, um, as everyone was kind of like, you know, punching a clock, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I think that advantage is really cool. And you know, from a management standpoint, you have to make an adjustment for that. Kitcaster, our company, is, you know, pulls a lot from traction from Gino Wickman, you know,
Mhm.
which is everybody has a number, which is to say that they're responsible for the output, uh,
Mhm.
not the input. And the differentiation is, if we're booking podcasts, you have X amount of podcasts you need to be booked. Well, if you put in 100 hours a week or you put in 12 hours a week, it's really not, that's not what I'm worried about. It's not the input, it's the output. And we're really fortunate that we can work from home and have that kind of work. I come from a retail background where it's all about input. There's no, you have to be there on time because the store's open, man. Someone's got to be there to check people out. So now we have career paths that can facilitate work from home. So where I do think it's this great net positive, we're also careful to make sure that people don't get trapped in the gravity of the refrigerator or the gravity of, playing golf a little too much. Some people can, you give them an inch, they take a foot, and you want to make sure that they have the proper supports that a office environment can also provide people. So as we are organizing this work from home model, we were flirting with the idea of just going 100%, dispersed. But for us, what works is having kind of an HQ where people can come and also having the option to work remote.
Yeah, and I think, different folks want different things, and so it's interesting because you think there's so much, so you think everybody wants to work from home, and that's not always the case. There are people that need to leave their home and environment and go to a different environment to be productive. And I've really learned that about people in the last probably 2 years, where I thought everybody would love to work from home. It's not the case. So I like the dedicated workspace. We do the same thing because, you can't have noise, you can't have distractions. Of course, through the pandemic, we all got more empathetic because, not only you worked from home, but your kids were now taking school from home. Maybe your spouse was working from home. So there was a lot of activity. The dog is in the room, the dog is barking. So you just have more empathy for that because everybody's trying to do their best.
Yeah, I really relate to that. A couple of things came to mind. One was how much I loved working from home until the pandemic and my kids were there. Then I had to get out there.
And, prior to that, I worked from home for years and I loved it until the pandemic hit. And now I had to be on camera every day.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so it's the same as getting up, getting ready, getting showered, starting your day, which is fine. But, I love just coming to my computer first thing in the morning with my cup of coffee and just working in my pajamas. But I don't do that anymore.
Oh, yeah, I know. Now we got the Zoom culture. It's like, oh,
Right.
boy. I got to worry about
waist up. You got to have some business clothes on, right?
Yeah, I was actually a little concerned about that, and I was like considering like this kind of nook in my house. It's like, well, maybe I could set this up. And then I had a Zoom call with a client, and I was like, wow, she has an interesting jacket, but it was actually her comforter, and she was just in bed.
Oh.
In bed on Zoom. I was like, oh, okay, all bets are off. Anything goes.
Oh man, anything goes. Yeah, it's amazing, what people will say or do. So,
did you know that there is an increase in the number of women leaving the tech industry? As a woman-owned business, Directions Training has made it our mission and passion to change this statistic. That's why Jennifer created this podcast. We showcase insight from everyday women for everyday women in the tech industry. Do you know other people that would benefit from tuning in? Share the link and help us drive the advancement of women in the tech industry. Do you have a journey or know of someone that our listeners would benefit from hearing about? Reach out to us at directionstraining.com/podcast. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and wherever you find your podcasts. Now, back to the show.
So tell me something about what is emotional traction? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, you bet. Traction is something that I've been, from a business standpoint, has kind of been my specialty. Prior to Kitcaster, I had a company called Talk Launch, and we really focused on getting projects off the ground, so taking ideas and launching them to market. We did a lot of crowdfunding when that was kind of a viable source to launch products. So everything that kind of goes into that, from branding to advertising to web development, product development, all that good stuff. we worked in that capacity. And so, finding traction, and validating a product became almost like a language to me and maybe a lens that I saw things. So, emotional traction works in kind of a similar way, I suppose, in the sense that you have a subject that you need to validate. A lot of that might, if we're talking about an emotional state, is maybe kind of talking about what you were saying, which is like checking your personal bias. What is this emotional state arising from?
Mm-hmm.
And this can get a little esoteric, I suppose, because if you look at something, particularly emotions, in too deeply, the source might kind of be elusive, lack of a better word. So finding emotional traction is really kind of having the independence and liberty to experience and express emotion without attaching it to a particular source. Might be tormenting you. And this is challenging because there are obviously things that have happened in the past that will create emotion. But what I've found is to challenge myself in the sense that if an emotion arises, for me, traditionally, it's always been dealing with anger. Like, where does this anger come from? Well, prior to some work in this area, I might say like, well, I can look into the past and this, and this happened, and that's making me angry. Likewise, I could look to the future and say, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? I can't imagine a world where this is happening. That's making me angry. But kind of on some introspection, I found that like really what I'm doing is I'm experiencing emotion, and then I'm just validating it by kind of creating, I don't want to say an excuse, but finding a scaffolding to hang my anger on. And now finding emotional traction is to allow an emotion, particularly a big emotion like anger, to exist, examine it in my body, be curious about it, but try not to attach it to things that have happened to me in the past or projections of a potential future. And what I found is with these kind of techniques, these kind of practices, it shortens the duration of negative emotion, for example.
Very interesting.
So, for me, when I started working with that, with anger, I was able to find myself, if I was upset for some reason, let's say for 2 or 3 days, maybe by kind of observing it in this manner, that might shorten to 1 day. And with extra work, it might shorten it to half a day. And with extra work, it might shorten it to an hour, a minute, or, I guess the ultimate goal is just a second.
That's amazing. So when you say that you feel the emotion, but then you examine it, tell me, are there a series of questions you ask yourself, or how are you examining it? Are you thinking like, where is this coming from? Why did it initiate? Tell me a little bit more about that.
You bet. I bring it into like a real somatic experience. So introception. So anger, the way it arises in me is I can feel warmth on the back of my neck. I can feel the blood rushing to my cheeks. I can feel like acute visual awareness where kind of my field narrows in, like it's almost like a predation kind of response. So if I can notice like, oh, you're getting angry, what I'll do is go into my body and try and feel the sensation of that on the back of my neck. What does it feel like? Does it feel like pinpoints? Does it feel like tickling? How far down my neck does it go? What is the border between the feeling of heat and the feeling of coolness? So really just like exploring the sensation in my body to the point that it changes. And then you notice that like, okay, now my neck doesn't feel like that. And now the feeling of anger has subsided because so much of big emotion is actually a physical sensation in the body. So particularly this has been important with work because anger is something, that kind of is thrust upon us within a different delta, you know.
Right, right.
But let's say, for example, you get kind of an email that comes in hot, and it's
Mm-hmm.
somebody's upset, and they say this, and this. Well, that might just trigger like a fight, flight, or freeze reflex in me that biologically was put into my DNA to protect me from large animals, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But actually,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting in a well heated, perfectly safe office, but now I'm having this really visceral body experience. So while there is some palpable emotional material that you have to go through with big emotions, it really shouldn't be triggered by email.
Right, right.
So by using some of these techniques, I think allowed me to be more productive um, and also like kind of back to the kind of good faith is like entering in to relationships online with that good faith and assuming positive intent. Even if something is very blatantly rude, you know, it just might be like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe they're having a bad day. I don't know what's going on in their world, so I don't need to be reacting in some kind of visceral, emotional way.
I love that. I'm going to have to practice that and understand it. And especially when it's stressful, like stress when, you might be talking about anger, but for me, stress is a big thing. And then your body feels a certain way, and really to examine it and try to eliminate it would be awesome. I
Yeah,
love this.
absolutely. And it's the hard work to do, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a great acronym of it's SAD, which is stress, anxiety, anger, addiction, and depression. So
Mm.
it's sad.
Yep. Yep. That
Um,
is so true.
and we all have these, you know, and there's ways I think, particularly maybe in our professional career, that gives us glimpses of some of this heavier material that we can work through and practice with in our professional lives that hopefully, you know, spills over into our personal lives and gives us a little bit of soothing.
Yeah, that's great. So, I'm a visionary, I'm an entrepreneur, and I constantly come up with new ideas of ways to do things. And then I spurt it out to my staff, and they need to process it. What are some of the best practices that you've used to prioritize ideas?
Yeah, this is a good one because entrepreneurs are my people. And
Mm-hmm.
we are we are, you know, like butterflies hopping around from one flower to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a little destabilizing, you know. So I think that what's been helpful for me in my career, particularly as I'm balancing ideas and what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing, is kind of putting some rules around it, you know, just because of a couple facts. One, you don't want to waste a bunch of money in a project that is doomed.
Mm-hmm.
But two, you don't want to waste time more than anything because you only have so much time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing, particularly if you have responsibilities, you have a family, that you need to make the most of your time. So for me, I've created kind of a series of validations that keep me on track with my ideas. And that is, you know, to kind of a gut check, you know, is this fun? What I'm working on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is this of service? And does it make money?
Mm-hmm.
Those are
Right.
three things. And I can kind of go into that a little bit, but also there's an organization of ideas, because what's kind of also interesting about ideas is if you look where ideas come from, that's also kind of mysterious. They
Mm.
come from inspiration. They come out of the void, and you have this idea. And that, in my opinion, no matter how ridiculous, in my experience, my ideas are, there needs to be a home for that. And
Mm-hmm.
the home needs to be not in my brain. Because the other thing about ideas is if you're chewing on something for too long, it kind of holds back some other stuff. So what I do is I use a Trello board, which is, folks aren't familiar with the Trello board. It's basically, if you imagined taking Post-it notes and just putting them across your desk, left to right, Trello board is a digital representation of that.
Okay.
And what I do is each of those Post-it notes, we'll call it on the Trello board, represents a different idea. And then I can stack and organize ideas underneath that would
Mm-hmm.
support that let's say a business idea. And then I organize the Post-it notes from left to right, the ones that I'm prioritizing. So if you go look at my Trello board, the things that's furthest pinned to the left is what is getting the majority of my, time, energy, and money investment. And as you trickle to the right are ideas that are, not as relevant to what I'm trying to do. If you get all the way to the furthest right, then there's this idea of a spinning soap dispenser that is in a walk-in shower that I just have this vision for that I probably will never work on, but it's got a home on this Trello board.
Right, right. I love that.
So,
Now, do the right ones move to the left ever?
Absolutely. Sometimes stuff jumps way to the front of the line. So, and it just depends on how it's working through that validation process, because a lot of times, for me, if it's not fun, I'm just not naturally going to want to do it. You know what I mean? So, I have to prioritize that. It has to be of service because I believe that I'm on this planet to help people, and if I don't feel like it's helping and it's not of service, then I just don't have time for that. And then it has to make money, because if it didn't make money, well, then I would rather just sit in my closet and write love songs, because I like oh, no.
That's right. That's
I don't have time
right.
to
I love that prioritization, because really it has to be fun. I tell everybody that if you're working and what you're doing, you're not loving it, then you got to go somewhere else and do it where you love it, because work has to be fun. We spend a lot of hours working.
Absolutely.
And so if you can't make it fun, then you got to find something that you're so passionate about that you just love. And that's really so important. And yeah, at the end of the day, it has to make money. Otherwise, it's not worth my time. I love that. I love that.
So
wow, I'm going to try this Trello board, because I do have so many ideas, and I'm going to, start to organize them.
Yeah, it's really fun. Because you'll be going through things that have been on the right side of the board for a while, and then there's just a little turn, a little spark where you're like, oh, do know how this can create revenue, and then boom, it's way over to the left, and then you add all the different information and the layers until you get tied into a knot, and then you're like, oh well, okay, it moves over to the right a couple of spots.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So how does service, fun, and profit help you validate your business models as we talk about, these ideas?
Yeah, you bet. Basically, that's going to put it in the game. I'm going to act. If it's of service, it's fun, it's making money, I'm moving, So I'm going to basically create that product. Okay. And I kind of have a strict validation mode, which is, reaching out to people I know, seeing if they'll buy it. If they do, great. Working from there to people I don't know. This is on a one-on-one. These are phone calls. If I've got a new product, service, software idea, I call people that I think would be interested in it. I ask them if they would buy it. If they say yes, I send them a link and say, buy it here. And if it's gone from friends and family, colleagues, clients, to people I don't know are interested and they're purchasing it, and then I can bridge that gap, and now it's no longer a phone call, but rather I'm using kind of standardized marketing channels online. Now I feel like I have validated a product. This product's ready to go. It will work. The last kind of validation for me will be, am I the right person to do this right now? I don't think there's any reason to do anything unless you're going to be the best in the world at it. So I'm going to ask myself, can I be the best in the world at this right now? And if the answer is like no, then even though I found kind of product market fit, I found an audience, I'm just not the person to do it right now. And that's kind of a real hard one for me traditionally. All of these validations actually have been excruciating.
Hard, yeah.
Because when you're putting ideas down, it's there's a real identity component where you've gone out on a limb and you told people I was going to do X, Y, Z, and you went out and did it, it didn't work out. And now you gotta own that. People are gonna ask you about it. So there's a feeling that if the idea didn't work, well, man, that means I didn't work. So kind of working through some of that personal material can be really challenging. You don't want to feel like a failure. You have to create a distance between, the success of the product and the success of you as an individual.
Right. No, that's so good. Because, you have to fail in order to succeed. People don't understand that sometimes. They are so hard on themselves. But if you don't try different things, you're never going to get there. You'll be always wondering, what if? And so I always say, when a child learns to walk, they don't just start walking, they fall quite a few times before they really start walking. And then they start running because now they've got it down pat. So you gotta start small and then take it, along the path. So that's great.
Yeah.
So in closing, and Ryan, I've really enjoyed our conversation so much. But in closing, what advice would you give to a woman considering a career in the tech industry?
Oh boy, I've loved this conversation too, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. One piece of advice that I gave my daughter is to go find the person that's doing the job you're interested in and ask them how to get there. My daughter's a freshman in high school, and talking to her about college, and she's, I think like anybody, their hopes and dreams, you're a little timid about it, And she's like, well, I really want to go to college in Hawaii. As a father, my heart drops because tuition is for like the University of Hawaii. But what I told her, I was like, well, you know what? There's an admissions counselor that works at the University of Hawaii, and she can create a map for you to get there. And that map may be really hard, but it's not shrouded in mist. The opportunities and potential for particularly women in technology are extraordinary. I've met amazing women founders that have raised tens of millions of dollars, of people that believe in what they're doing. It's out there, and these women are vocal, So I think the biggest thing is recognizing like your hopes and dreams are timid, but finding bravery and then acting and finding that person that's doing the thing that you want to do and ask them for a map. And then you can make a determination on your own whether you want to take those steps.
Yeah, no, I love that. To have some kind of a framework or a roadmap or a journey map to show you what that path looks like, to see, okay, am I ready to jump into this? Is this something I want to do? But technology has so much opportunity for women today, and technology is just not always coding. There's so many different types of jobs within technology that women just are stellar at. So great advice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you share with our listeners how they can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. If you're interested in Kitcaster services, check out kitcaster.com. If you want to go on podcast, that's a great place to do it. If you want to reach out to me directly, LinkedIn is a great spot. If you, my name's Ryan Estes, and you can kind of punch that in there. I'm affiliated with Kitcaster. You should be able to see my plaid shirt. And I would be more than happy to speak to any of your listeners or people that are interested in anything we covered today.
Great. Well, thank you, Ryan. This was an honor to have you on the show, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Hopefully we can have you back again soon.
I would love that, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Tech in the Right Direction. Please take a minute to subscribe or follow so that you never miss an episode. Also, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thank you. See you next week.
From IT skill enhancements to end-user adoption training, Directions Training is your resource to help optimize the effectiveness of your technology investments. Over 500,000 students have taken advantage of our wide selection of technology and business training solutions covering the most popular applications today, such as Microsoft 365, Azure, Windows 10, and more. As a podcast listener, we invite you to take advantage of an exclusive offer. Receive 30 days of free access to our Microsoft official curriculum, on-demand courses for IT professionals or end users. Visit us at www.directionstraining.com/podcast to claim this offer today. Hurry, this offer is only available for a limited time. Success is a journey. Ask for directions.